Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the ongoing violence in Pakistan and efforts by its leadership to rein in the Taliban. Joining us now from Islamabad is Sultan Mehmood Hali. He is a veteran of the Pakistan Air Force and television host with PTV News. Also with us from Ithaca, New York, is Raza Rumi. He's a policy analyst, journalist and author from Pakistan. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Sultan, let me start with you in Islamabad. Pakistan has taken the battle against the Taliban to places like North Waziristan. Who do you believe is prevailing in this fight?
Well, the Pakistan armed forces have the upper hand right now, and they have managed to strike a very telling blow. And the results can be seen that only in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is adjacent to Waziristan and which was the biggest target of the terror attacks, there the terror attacks have reduced by something like 87%, which I believe is no mean achievement. However, having said that, we haven't yet completely eradicated them because the sporadic attacks continue, and until the terrorism is over, we cannot say that the victory is in the hands of the Pakistani security forces.
Raza, what is your assessment of this current fight between the Taliban and government forces in Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with the assessment made by Mr. Hali because certainly, if you look at the overall numbers of terror incidents in the country, they have gone down by 50% overall, which is a big achievement in the sense that Pakistan has been in the grip of intense terror sort of activities for the last 7 to 8 years. And it's only, I think, the first time that the numbers are reducing to that level. But still, there are many groups within the country, particularly in other parts of the country, where they operate and they strike from time to time. And for that, you would actually need a sort of an urban terror view of fighting this whole jihad industry. So I think some long-term measures need to be taken in because military action is always a short-term solution.
Sultan, the Taliban released a report on what it's been doing this past year, especially in 2015. It says that its fighters killed hundreds of people across the country in 2015. These included, of course, civilians. It included politicians, security forces, policemen as well. What are we to make of that report, and how can we verify what they're saying?
Well, you see, the problem is that when the safe havens and the training grounds of the Taliban in the Waziristan area, that is the tribal area, were hit, and they were hit very hard, and I have visited it after some of it was cleared. It turned out that these were very hardened criminals. They were very well trained, and what they did was that not all of them were killed. Some either moved to adjacent Afghanistan, while some trickled into the cities of Pakistan, and you see, they are very easy to mix around in the public because they, most of them belong to either the Pakistani community or to communities which resemble Pakistanis. So in order to identify them, it needs a Herculean intelligence effort, and these people have been carrying on their heinous agenda in metropolitan cities like Karachi, and even in a little bit in Islamabad, but quite a bit in central Punjab and southern Punjab. So it's a uphill task, and it will need much more than just the military, but it needs a concerted effort for which the government of Pakistan has a national action plan in progress, which takes in something like 20 different aspects, which includes the madrasa reforms, which includes getting to the source of the financing, that is the terror financing, and a number of other steps. But it's a long-drawn procedure, and I don't see a result, a positive result, coming up in the next weeks or months. It may probably take years.
Raza, when it comes to the fight against the Taliban in Pakistan, who's taking the lead here? Is it the military or the government? Who's calling the shots?
Well, I mean, on the face of it, the government says that the military and the government are on the same page, and, they are working through coordination. But the reality on ground is that it is the military which is sort of leading this whole effort, because even the decision to go into North Waziristan was taken by the military. The government was trying to negotiate with the Taliban earlier, So in that sense, the military surely is in the driving seat. But then the Prime Minister jumped in after last year's Peshawar attacks, and he announced this National Action Plan. And since then, you hear from time to time the civilian ministers doing that. But at the provincial or the subnational level, it is very much being driven by the military commanders, and that is that is good for short term to actually hunt down the hardcore terror networks and perhaps to do some punitive action against terror financing. But in the long term, what you need is the civilian institutions like the police, like the judiciary, like prosecution, like reorganized intelligence services, which would actually, work towards a more medium-term to long-term counter-terrorism in the country. And that is slow. In fact, there was a row between the government and the military some weeks ago where a press release was issued by the military in which it said that the government was acting up a bit slow in the implementation of the National Action Plan. And then the Prime Minister's office responded by saying, no, we are doing as much as we can and we know what we are doing, etc. So there are those undercurrents of some tension as well. But by and large, I think it's a shared objective because Pakistanis are sick of terrorism. And particularly any politician in power, if he or she has to survive, has to fight this menace, because without security, there is no economic development or growth. And that's the biggest issue facing Pakistan.
Right. Sultan, we've heard a lot about the military campaign against the Taliban, but can this battle be won just on the battlefield, just through military means? Or does the government have to engage with the Taliban and reach some kind of political settlement with them?
Well, you see, it has to be a concerted effort. The military, as was discussed by my co-participant, took the lead in this, but the military's role was to hit hard, but there were a lot of, side issues. There were internally displaced persons. Then there are people who are disgruntled. Then there is also some collateral damage. All these act to the state of terrorism and may actually multiply the issue rather than reduce it. So the military has to hit hard, and then it has to take a back seat as far as the rehabilitation of the people in those territories, and also ensuring that there is education, there is development, there is employment for the people, and the houses are rebuilt. That has to be done by the government of Pakistan. And unless they act in concert, I think the job is only half done. In fact, if anything, it may have longer repercussions or consequences if the military leaves it as such, only by hitting the people and not looking after the lives of the survivors, or making sure that work goes on and development actually takes place.
Raza, would it be fair to say that the Pakistani government can't do this just by itself? We heard Sultan tell us earlier on that we have situations where the Taliban hit targets in North Waziristan, and then when the military goes after them, they cross the border into Afghanistan. So this is going to require the cooperation of other countries, neighboring countries, Afghanistan, of India as well. What kind of cooperation are we seeing already?
Well, I think with Afghanistan, things have been up and down, but certainly the military chief in Pakistan has been visiting Afghanistan. Immediately after the Peshawar attack last year, when the kids were massacred in a school, he went to Afghanistan. And since then, they have been trying to sort of look at these networks, the Taliban second tier and the first tier leadership, which have crossed over into Afghanistan. But certainly, this is a very complicated situation, because until you don't have peace in Afghanistan, a kind of a peace deal carved out between the various actors, this instability will continue. But, I would like to add here that and of course India as well, but then India blames Pakistan of sort of sending in terrorists. So the region is in a kind of a state of turmoil, and now with Iran Saudi tensions rising, it is a fairly hyperactive region these days, and there is a much needed sort of effort is required to undertake some diplomatic negotiations and finding some common ground between all these countries. Because if you look at it, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India, they all share one single problem of terrorism. and they have to find a joint kind of a strategy. So there have been some positive developments, but I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I just want to make a quick point on the earlier issue of fighting the terrorist networks, etc. I think one of the major issues here is that, Pakistan has now from anywhere between 20 to 40,000 seminaries. They have mushroomed since the 80s. And they are actually the source of kind of, the extremist mindset. And that is where I think the government, the civilian government, is really lagging so far, because they haven't really worked out a method to regulate these seminaries. You can't close them because millions of kids, poor kids, go to school there. But you have to introduce a modern curricula, and you have to check out who's teaching there, who comes in there, who trains what. And I think that is the basis for the terrorist kind of infrastructure, because they take people, young men, from some of these seminaries, not all, and then they recruit them and brainwash them. So I think it is all kind of linked to both the regional peace, to the domestic sort of imperatives within Pakistan, and staying the course, most importantly.
Right, Raza, these seminaries that you refer to are also known as madrasas. These are religious schools which are in these areas. Sultan, how does the government go about tackling this kind of problem where this militancy is starting at the school level?
Well, you see, the first and foremost task was to ensure that all these madrasas or the religious seminaries, they are registered, because to date, the government did not even have an up-to-date list of which seminary is located where, who is it run by, and who is financing it. And that again was an uphill task, because it was found out that there were numerous, in fact hundreds, of seminaries about which the government did not even know about. And secondly, all of them, I must say, are not run by terrorists or organizations which sponsor terrorism, but at least they were reluctant in coming out with the source of their income. So that was only the first step. And then the second step was regulating their curricula, and also ensuring that hate sponsored or any subjects, any teachings which are going to bring about either sectarian hatred or hatred against the West or hatred against non-Muslims is to be purged. So this is again a work in progress. It is going on, but the results so far are not 100% satisfactory. In fact, I will say about only 60% of it has been achieved so far.
Right, Raza, when we talk about the Taliban in Pakistan, is it a mistake to perhaps refer to them as the Taliban, one monolithic, unified group? Are these different groups perhaps having allegiance to the same ideology?
Yes, absolutely. You see, over time, what has happened is how the Pakistani Taliban movement, it's more like a loose network of from 2 to 3 dozen smaller organizations that adhere to the same ideological framework and have been sort of in sync with Al-Qaeda worldview. And they came together in the late, around 2006, 2007, and that's how this movement grew. And, it's sort of monolith. And but the good thing in the recent months we have seen is that many of these smaller groups have actually been neutralized, or at least been driven out from the areas that they were controlling. And but then the problem is when they go to Afghanistan, Afghanistan itself, is in a transitional sort of state. And there they do find, both the support of other groups over there. And Pakistan alleges, even the foreign sort of sponsorship, and usually the Pakistan military raises fingers towards India that it kind of funds and aids these terrorists. But of course, these are allegations that have still to be sort of proved with hardcore evidence. But that is the problem that we face now. That the tackling of this Pakistani Taliban network will finally take place once you have a modicum of stability in the bordering areas of Afghanistan, and some sort of resolution is reached between Pakistan and India on this issue.